Hi.
I'm Ava.
I was standing in the corner of the ballroom, wrapped in a navy silk gown that clung to my body like it was custom-stitched for my new life. The chandeliers above scattered gold light like stars thrown into a lake, and all around me floated laughter, champagne, and the kind of effortless confidence that never came easy to me. People moved like they belonged here, fluid, polished, important. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't pretending to be one of them. I was. But this isn't where the story starts.
No.
It starts in the back of a rusting car with a cracked dashboard on a Tuesday afternoon when I still smelled like burnt coffee and desperation, and when a girl named Emma told me I'd never be more than what I was in that moment. Lost, average, and forgettable. Emma had been my girlfriend for 2 years, though in hindsight, I don't think she ever really liked me. She liked the idea of fixing me, of shaping me into someone shinier she could show off. She told me often that I had potential, like it was a compliment, but it always landed like a warning. She'd say I was smart, just not focused. Creative, but scattered. Loyal, but too soft. I took it all in like it was love, like if I worked harder, I'd earn more of her approval. Maybe even her pride. Instead, I became a shadow of her expectations, shrinking myself to fit her plans. And when I finally admitted I didn't want to be the assistant in her spotlight, she didn't cry. She just said, "You'll never change," and got out of the car like she was stepping away from a problem she'd finished diagnosing. I spent the rest of that week in a fog, sleeping too much, forgetting to eat, scrolling through job boards like they were written in another language. I still worked at a dying bookstore downtown, barely covering rent, sometimes stealing peanut butter packets from the break room when my account hit single digits. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a vision. But I had a silence now that Emma had left, and inside that silence, something started to stir. Not a fire, not yet, but the memory of every time someone had told me I couldn't, that I wouldn't, that I wasn't. I wrote them down in a notebook one night, in red ink. Every sentence I'd swallowed over the years. Every insult dressed as advice. Then I flipped the page and wrote, "Prove them wrong." That's where it began. The first thing I changed was my morning. I stopped sleeping past noon. I stopped numbing out with old shows and leftover sadness. I forced myself up, even when my body begged for the comfort of blankets. I'd sit by the window, watch the sun bleed into the sky, and open my laptop. At first, I had no idea what I was doing. I just wrote. Short essays, blog posts, even letters I never sent. I wrote until my fingers ached and my doubts quieted. I posted anonymously at first, testing the waters. But the comments came. Slowly, then more. People said my words made them feel seen.
Heard.
Like someone had finally said what they'd been too afraid to admit. I didn't reply to most. I just saved them, screenshot by screenshot, proof that maybe I was something after all. Then came the feature. A woman named Callie from an independent publication messaged me one night, said she'd been following my work, said she loved my voice. Would I be open to a freelance spot? Just one piece. I almost said no. Almost deleted the message like it was a prank. But I said yes. I wrote about burnout, about invisible labor, about trying so hard to be likable that you forget how to be real. That piece went viral. I didn't know it at the time. I was shelving books when my phone exploded with notifications.
Calls.
Emails. Offers. The bookstore felt smaller the moment I stepped back inside. Within 6 months, I quit. Not because I hated the bookstore, but because it had held the version of me that Emma had left behind. I rented a tiny studio, barely bigger than a closet, but it had good light and quiet walls, and I filled it with secondhand furniture and sticky notes full of dreams. I wrote constantly, articles, columns, guest blogs. My name started appearing in places I used to bookmark with envy. I made enough to upgrade from ramen to groceries, from a flip phone to an actual smartphone. I bought a dress that wasn't from a clearance bin. I started walking straighter, even when no one was watching. I never reached out to Emma. Never blocked her either. She watched, though. I saw her name pop up in the views on my Instagram stories. Never liked anything. Never commented. Just watched like a silent ghost. I pretended not to care. I even told myself I was over it. But sometimes, in the quiet before sleep, I'd remember her words. "You'll never change." And part of me would still flinch, even as the evidence stacked up against her voice. A year later, I was invited to speak at a panel for young writers. It was a small event, maybe 50 people, but I prepared like it was the Oscars. I wore a blazer that made me feel important, put on lipstick that didn't smudge, and told my story without flinching. Afterward, a girl came up to me, maybe 19, eyes wide and hopeful. She said, "I didn't think people like you existed. Thank you for proving me wrong." I wanted to tell her that I didn't always exist like this either, that I'd been buried under doubt for years. But instead, I just hugged her. I cried that night. Not out of sadness. Out of something else. Like pride, but deeper. Like I had returned to myself. Then came the nomination. I laughed when I first saw the email. A media award, national level. I was up against people I had idolized for years. I didn't think I had a shot. I showed my therapist the email. She smiled and said, "Why not you?" That question stuck with me. It followed me through the weeks leading up to the gala. I bought a real dress this time. Navy silk. I practiced walking in heels without wobbling. I watched speeches online to learn how not to cry if I won, or how to clap gracefully if I didn't. I didn't tell many people. I wanted to keep it mine. The night of the gala, I arrived early. I took a deep breath before stepping out of the car, reminding myself that I belonged here. I wasn't the girl in the rustic car anymore. I was a writer, a name, a presence. I moved through the crowd like I'd been doing it for years, even though my hands still trembled when I reached for a glass of water. I didn't notice her at first. The room was loud, filled with sequins and speeches and clinking glasses. But then I turned toward the bar and there she was, Emma, standing 5 feet away, wearing a red dress too tight at the waist and heels she clearly hadn't broken in. Her hair was shorter, her eyeliner thicker, but I'd have known that posture anywhere. Stiff spine, careful smile, eyes scanning the room like she was looking for someone more impressive than herself. I froze. Not out of fear, out of something else. Like recognition. Like watching a dream you once had shrink in the light of day. She didn't see me. Not at first. Her attention was fixed on someone else. I turned slightly, enough to blend into the crowd. My heart raced, not from panic, but from the sharp realization that I didn't want her to see me until I was ready. Until I chose. And then, moments later, the host took the stage, clearing his throat into the microphone. It was time. The category I was nominated for was second on the list. My stomach twisted as the names were read, but I kept my smile in place. My palms were damp, my chest tight. I didn't even hear the beginning of the sentence that followed, just the last words. And the winner is Ava Nolan. That was my name. My name. And as the applause rose like a wave, I stood up. My chair scraped softly against the floor. I walked to the stage like the air was holding me up, not my legs. And from the corner of my eye, I saw Emma turn. Her eyes locked on mine. Confusion first. Then disbelief. And then nothing. Because she didn't recognize me. The applause echoed like waves crashing into the past I thought I'd buried. I stood at the podium, hands steady now, my name still dancing in the air. The award, a sleek, glass prism, felt colder than expected, heavier too, as if it held the weight of every version of myself I had outgrown. I took a breath, deep and slow, and looked out over the crowd. Faces blurred together, some familiar, most not, but there was one I kept trying not to find.
Emma.
I knew she was still watching. I could feel it, the same way you feel a draft slip under a door. I didn't address her. I didn't mention the heartbreak or the rebuilding. I simply said, "Thank you for seeing me," and stepped down. Back at my table, people clapped my shoulders, raised glasses, snapped photos. I smiled for all of it, but something underneath had shifted. Not in a bad way. More like the soft cracking of ice when the river underneath starts to move. I excused myself, slipping out to the hallway for air. The night had turned colder than expected. The city outside sparkled like it knew secrets, like it had watched me crawl, and now applauded me too. And just when I thought the moment was mine alone, I heard heels clicking behind me. I didn't turn right away. But I knew. Some sounds never leave you. Her voice came soft, measured.
Ava.
It hit me like a chord struck too hard on an untuned piano. I turned slowly. Emma stood there, arms crossed, unsure if she was allowed to smile. She opened her mouth to speak again, but paused like the words had caught on something sharp. I beat her to it. "You didn't recognize me?" I said. It wasn't a question. She looked at me for a long second. "No," she said finally. "I didn't." We stood in silence. The hallway stretched on either side like a waiting stage, but I didn't want to perform. I just wanted to understand what this moment meant. Emma looked different, but not in the obvious ways. There was a heaviness to her, like she was carrying a backpack of things she'd once thrown at other people. She stepped forward and smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You look incredible." I nodded, but didn't say thank you. "Not yet." She kept going, her words careful, like she didn't know who I was anymore, which maybe she didn't. "I was invited through work. I didn't know you were being honored. Otherwise She stopped herself. "Actually, I don't know what I would have done." There was a time I'd have filled that silence for her, eased the tension. Now, I let it sit. She shifted, clearly uncomfortable with the version of me that didn't need to make her feel better. "I read your work sometimes," she offered. "Didn't realize it was you until someone at my table pointed it out." That stung more than I expected. Not the admission, but the distance in it. I had built the life she couldn't see, even while looking at it. But I only nodded again and turned toward the balcony. I needed distance. And I needed her to see I was no longer orbiting her gravity. "Ava," she said again, stepping closer. "Can we talk? I know this isn't the place, but—" "Then maybe don't start," I said, sharper than I meant. She flinched, a small crack in her calm. "Sorry," she whispered. I almost walked away. Almost. But something about her voice, smaller, unsure, stopped me. So I stayed. And that's when she said it. "I got let go last month. The startup I joined folded. I've been freelancing. Honestly, I'm not doing great." I blinked. Emma? Admitting weakness? I didn't know how to hold that. For years, she'd walked like certainty was stitched into her skin. Now she looked unstitched. And I hated that some part of me wanted to comfort her. Old habits die loud. "I think I screwed up," she added. "Not just with work. With you." This was the twist I hadn't prepared for. Emma apologizing? Admitting fault without a follow-up excuse? It didn't feel like closure. It felt like a door reopening in a house I'd already sold. Still, I said nothing. I needed to see where this was going. "I thought pushing you was helping," she continued. "But maybe I just didn't want to wait for you to catch up." "You weren't helping," I said. Calm, clear. "You were controlling." She didn't deny it. "I thought if I left, it would motivate you." "You left because I stopped needing your approval." That shut her up. She nodded, slowly. "Yeah," she admitted. "That too." I should have felt victorious. I didn't. All I felt was tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from work, but from healing scars reopened just to be acknowledged. I turned to go, but before I could, Emma pulled out her phone. Her hand trembled slightly. "There's something you should know," she said. "I didn't recognize you tonight because I wasn't expecting you to win. I was told you wouldn't be here." "What?" She hesitated. "When I joined this publishing circle, some of them, knew we had history. Someone told me you'd decline the nomination, that you were stepping back from public things. I didn't even consider you might show up, let alone win." It clicked then. A faint memory of an email, weeks ago, from a committee rep who'd suddenly gone cold when I asked for a panel spot. At the time, I'd brushed it off as overbooking. But now I saw the edges of something sharper.
"Who told you that?" I asked.
She shook her head. "It doesn't matter. What matters is you weren't supposed to be here tonight. Someone tried to erase you again. And you showed up anyway." My pulse quickened. The memory of every time I had been silenced rose up like smoke. But now, instead of choking on it, I let it drift. "I'm sorry," Emma said. "I know it doesn't fix anything. I just thought you should know." I stared at her. Really stared. She wasn't the girl I'd loved. But maybe I wasn't the girl who loved her anymore either. Whatever connection we had once had wasn't gone. It was just altered. A ghost with nowhere to haunt. "I'm not asking for anything," she added. "Not a second chance. Just peace." I nodded. "Then leave it here," I said. "Tonight. Let this be where it ends." She blinked fast, like she was holding back tears. But she nodded. "Okay." She turned to go, and I didn't stop her. I watched her walk away, a smaller silhouette than I remembered, swallowed by the glow of the chandeliers inside. I walked back into the ballroom with a new kind of stillness. I had answers now. Not all of them, but enough. Someone had tried to block my path. Maybe it was someone from my past, or maybe it was just the system doing what it always did to quiet women. But it hadn't worked. I was still here, still rising. As I passed by the dance floor, a woman I didn't recognize reached out to stop me. She held a phone with my article pulled up. "You're her, right? Ava Nolan." I nodded. She smiled, soft and sincere. "Your piece on invisible grief, it changed how I talked to my daughter." "Thank you." I thanked her, stunned again by how far my words had traveled without me knowing. I slipped outside once more, this time without tension in my shoulders. Later that night, as I undressed in my apartment and hung up the navy dress, I stared at my reflection. Not to admire the makeup or the hair, but to see the girl who refused to be erased. I ran my fingers over the glass award on my desk, then turned off the lights and climbed into bed. My phone buzzed once. A message from an unknown number. It just said, "She's not the only one who underestimated you." I stared at it and smiled. Not because I knew what would come next, but because now I was ready for anything. The message sat on my screen like a challenge. Just a few words from an unknown number. "She's not the only one who underestimated you." I didn't recognize the sender. No name, no context, just that subtle thread of familiarity wrapped in mystery. For a second, I considered ignoring it, chalking it up to a well-meaning stranger or some anonymous admirer. But something about the phrasing, the exact choice of words, felt too pointed to be random. It echoed a conversation I'd once had with someone I hadn't thought about in months. Someone who'd vanished from my life with just as much quiet as they had entered it. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind raced through every possibility. Could it be someone from the award committee? Another writer? Or, though it seemed unlikely, someone from my past watching me rise from a distance, the way Emma had? By morning, the message had burrowed into my brain like a stone in a shoe, small, but impossible to ignore. I didn't reply. Instead, I went for a long walk through the city. The streets still glistened from the night's rain, and everything smelled like wet concrete and early winter. I passed by the bookstore I used to work in, where a new barista stood behind the counter. She didn't recognize me either. That used to sting. Now it felt like freedom. A week passed. I kept writing, kept showing up to meetings, kept living like I wasn't unraveling the seams of a deeper story behind that single text. Then, another message. This time, "You were always the one with the spark."
They just didn't want to see it.
No signature again. My chest tightened. This wasn't just a fan. This was someone who knew. Someone who had once seen me closely enough to know what I hid even from myself. I tried tracing the number, burner app. No help. I posted nothing about it. Told no one. I didn't want to look paranoid. Or worse, hopeful. That same evening, I received a DM from Callie, the editor who first published me. She asked if I'd heard about the magazine's internal leak scandal. I hadn't. Apparently, a few freelancers' personal emails had been accessed by someone inside, someone trying to reroute opportunities. My stomach dropped. "Do you think I was one of them?" I typed. Her reply was instant. "That's why I'm messaging. Your file was flagged. Someone tried to revoke your panel spot weeks ago using a fake decline email." but it got caught before it went through. I just didn't want to say anything until we had proof. The pieces started aligning in my mind like dominoes. Emma's confusion at seeing me. The sudden coldness from the committee weeks before the gala. The stranger's messages. And now this confirmation that someone had been quietly trying to erase my steps. I closed my laptop and just sat there, the hum of the city filtering through my window like static. The next day, I got another text. Check your inbox. This is bigger than you think. I opened my email. There it was. An anonymous tip sent from a mass domain. Attached was a PDF. My name on an internal spreadsheet. Notes beside it. High risk for visibility. Watch closely. Divert major exposure. It was from an agency, not media.
PR?
The kind that worked behind the scenes to curate reputations, sometimes for brands, sometimes for people. One name was linked to the document, Verity Capital, a major talent firm I had once interned for years ago. And beneath it a list of names. Writers. Activists. Voices that had risen quickly and disappeared just as fast. I felt the chills settle into my bones. Someone was managing silence. And I'd nearly been silenced, too. The next 48 hours were a blur of deep research. Old files.
LinkedIn pages.
Deleted tweets. I found a trail. Faint, but undeniable. People whose careers had flatlined right as they were gaining traction. Some had vanished from social media altogether. Some had started over under new names. Some had whispered online about being blacklisted, only to be shouted down as bitter or dramatic. I added it all to a folder. Labeled it Red List. And then I did what scared me most. I called Nyla. She picked up on the third ring, her voice groggy with sleep or maybe the weight of too many late-night clients. Ava, she asked. Everything okay? I told her what I'd found. Slowly. Carefully. Then faster, because my voice couldn't hold it in anymore. She didn't interrupt. Just listened. When I was done, she took a long breath. You need to be careful, she said. If this is what it looks like, they'll come for you harder now. Then help me do it right, I replied. By the end of the week, we had a legal plan. Quiet.
Clean.
Not a lawsuit.
Not yet.
But records, statements, backups. We contacted a few of the others on the list. 3 replied. 2 confirmed they'd been iced out. 1 broke down on the call and said, I thought I was crazy. I said, You're not. They just wanted you to think you were. That night, the anonymous number texted again. They'll notice you figured it out. Be ready. I still didn't know who it was. But something told me they were once like me. Someone almost lost to the silence. Then came the biggest twist. Emma emailed me. The subject line, You're in danger. I opened it, hands shaking. Inside was a screenshot, an internal thread from a private Slack channel. Verity Capital. A conversation where someone had shared my article and written, She's making too much noise. Get her filtered out. Beneath it, a message from an account labeled Yell, Emma's initials. I thought we agreed to keep her out of the loop. She's unpredictable. My blood ran cold. I reread it 3 times. Then, below it, another message.
Don't worry.
We'll bury her like the others. Attached was a voice recording. Muffled.
Low.
But unmistakably Emma's voice. She's not dangerous. She's just persistent. We can wait her out. It wasn't just betrayal now. It was strategy. And she'd played her role willingly. I didn't reply. I forwarded everything to Nyla. Then I sat back and stared at the awards still on my desk. I could go public. Write about it. Expose it all. But I'd become the target they warned me I'd be. Or I could wait. Build my case. Let the truth grow roots. For now, I chose the second path. I saved every file, every message, every thread. Because I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing. The girl Emma left behind had vanished. The woman standing now wasn't here for permission. She was here to end the silence, for herself, and for everyone they tried to erase. And I was just getting started. There's a unique kind of silence that falls when you've seen behind the curtain and know you're being watched. Every time I open my inbox, every phone call, even casual glances at my social media felt suspicious. But I didn't let it stop me. I doubled down on everything. I kept publishing. I said yes to new projects. I networked harder. I let my name echo louder in places they never expected it to reach. If they wanted me quiet, I would make my noise impossible to ignore. The messages from the anonymous number continued. Sometimes cryptic, sometimes direct. One afternoon it read, "Check Verity's quarterly reports." Buried in the footnotes. I did. Deep in the budget section, under Digital Strategy Initiatives, was an unassuming subheading, Narrative Direction Services. Just a phrase. But I knew what it meant now. They weren't just managing reputations, they were manipulating outcomes. Steering who got platformed and who got buried. I forwarded the evidence to Nyla. She called within minutes. "This is enough for an expose," she said. "If a major outlet takes this and verifies it, we have a shot." I hesitated. What if they trace it back to me? "They will," she said. "But now they'll know you're not alone." We reached out to Ledger, an investigative publication known for taking down political machines and media monopolies. Within days, a reporter named Kyle reached out. He'd already heard whispers. When I met him, he showed me a folder thicker than I expected. My name was in it. So was Emma's. So were over 20 others. Most women. Most from marginalized communities. "They filter voices that don't fit the clean narrative," he said. "They sell authenticity, but only the type that keeps the money flowing." He asked if I'd be willing to go on record. I said yes. A week later, I was in a studio under harsh lights, microphone clipped to my collar, camera trained on my face. I told my story. Not just about Emma. About everything. About being the girl who paid for her own rise in bruises and receipts. About watching others disappear while everyone else cheered the silence. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I spoke like someone who'd lived every line and survived it. Kyle nodded through it all. When the camera clicked off, he said, "You just started a war." The article dropped 4 days later. The headline was brutal and honest. Silenced. The agency that bought quiet and buried potential. My name was front and center. Quotes. Emails. Screenshots. Even the Slack thread Emma had forwarded me. The story trended in under 6 hours. Emma's name was there too, but not as a victim. As a collaborator. She messaged me within hours. A long email. A mix of excuses and regrets. She said she had been manipulated too. That she hadn't known how deep it went. That she thought she was protecting me. That she had panicked. That she was sorry. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. She was part of the system. She may not have built the machine, but she turned the gears when it served her. The fallout was immediate. Verity's social channels went dark. Several of their executives released statements. 2 lawsuits were filed within a week, none by me. Yet. My inbox filled with messages. Some were supportive. Others were threatening. Anonymous trolls. Fake accounts. Someone tried to hack my website. Another tried to impersonate me in a smear thread. But I was ready. I had Nyla. I had receipts. I had truth. And for the first time, I had allies. Other writers started coming forward. Quietly at first. Then louder. They added their own stories. Their own evidence. Ledger released a follow-up piece. The red list is real. That's when everything broke open. I was invited to speak at panels not just about writing, but about justice. Equity. Representation. I didn't accept them all. But I accepted the ones that mattered. One panel in particular stood out, a discussion on media gatekeeping. When I arrived at the venue, I recognized a face in the second row. Joy. She had been one of the women on the list. Her blog had gone quiet 3 years ago. People said she burned out. She hadn't. She'd been locked out. Silenced before she could shine. After the panel, she hugged me, so tight, I thought I might break. "I thought I was imagining it," she whispered. "I thought it was just me." I pulled back and looked her in the eyes. That's what they want us to believe. Later that night, back in my apartment, I stared at my reflection. There were no awards in the mirror.
No spotlight.
Just me, still whole, still standing, but no longer alone. Then came the final twist. The anonymous number texted one last time. You're not done. One more name to uncover. Attached was a single photo.
Emma.
In an office, standing beside someone I didn't recognize. A man in a suit, his hand on her shoulder. Behind them, a plaque. Rothman Strategy Group. Not Verity. A different agency. I Googled it, and everything made sense. Rothman had acquired Verity in a quiet merger 6 months ago. The entire structure was still intact, just repackaged, relabeled. They were already building a new client list, new filters, a new version of the same machine. It wasn't over, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I forwarded the photo to Kyle. Then I poured myself a glass of water, opened my laptop, and began to write the next story. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure no one else disappeared the way I almost did. And the girl they said would never change? She became the woman who changed everything. The day the second article dropped, this time about Rothman, I didn't bother refreshing my notifications. I already knew what would happen. Statements, denials, accusations, performative apologies. People would rush to protect their brands. Some would act surprised. Others would pretend they were never involved. But what mattered most wasn't how the world responded. It was how I did. Because this time, I wasn't reacting. I was leading. Kyle had done the groundwork, but the story bore my voice. My name. My truth. I had learned to wield it like a weapon. Not to wound, but to illuminate. And as the fallout spread through the industry, I didn't hide. I didn't disappear into the background the way I once would have. I stood where they could see me. I received another message from Emma, but this time through her personal account. No formal subject line.
No deflexión.
Just a few words. I didn't know who I was hurting until I saw your name everywhere. It wasn't an apology. It was a confession. And it was too late. A few days later, I got a call from Ledger. They wanted me to co-author a column, an ongoing feature amplifying voices like mine. People who had almost been erased. People who were told they didn't fit. I said yes, and my first column launched under a new title, The Ones Who Survived the Silence. Emails flooded in. Stories like mine. Some older, some newer. One from a retired poet who hadn't published since 1987. One from a trans journalist blacklisted after one op-ed. One from a student whose dissertation was rejected for being too disruptive. I read every single one. I saved them in folders. Labeled them not by pain, but by potential. Because that's what they were. Proof that it wasn't just about me. It never had been. Then one morning, a package arrived at my apartment.
No sender. No markings.
Inside was a single envelope. No letter. Just a copy of the award gala program. My name circled. And tucked inside the crease, a Polaroid. It was me. In the hallway that night outside the ballroom. Taken from a distance. It should have scared me. But instead, I felt calm. Not because someone was watching, but because I finally knew that whatever force tried to erase me had failed. I had outlived the version of myself they had underestimated. Outwritten the narrative they tried to control. And someone, somewhere, was now watching not to control me, but to witness what came next. And I was just getting started. I met with Joy, the writer from the panel. Again, this time over coffee in a tiny bookstore cafe uptown. She wore a corduroy jacket and nervous energy like armor, but her voice was steady. I'm writing again, she said. I smiled. Send me the draft when you're ready. She hesitated. It's raw.
So was I said.
Later that evening, I spoke on a live stream. Topic: Rebuilding after erasure. Halfway through, a comment popped up from a hidden account. No name, just a sentence. You're not what I expected. I replied without pausing. That's the point. But the true ending didn't come until a month later. An invitation. Gala season again. This time, not an award. A keynote. I was asked to open the event. Speak for 15 minutes. The same stage I once stood on just months ago as an unexpected winner. This time, I wasn't walking up by surprise. I was invited to shape the room before it began. I almost said no. But then I thought of the girl Emma left behind in that cracked-up car. And I went. I wore a suit. Not to defy expectations, but because I finally didn't care about them. I stepped onto the stage with no notes. Just memory. I told the truth. I spoke of being erased. Of being underestimated. Of how I had once begged for a seat at the table, only to realize I could build my own. And I ended with this. If you've ever been told you were too loud, too different, too inconvenient to keep around, good. That means you were never meant to fit. You were meant to build something they couldn't control. The crowd rose. But I didn't need their applause. I had already given myself the one thing I had once asked the world for: permission. As I walked down from the stage, I passed a woman in the second row.
Emma.
She didn't stand. She didn't clap. She looked at me like she finally understood what it meant to lose something without realizing you ever had it.
Y nodded her head.
Not out of malice. Out of mercy. Because I had outgrown the version of me who needed revenge. Now I needed peace. Outside the venue, the night was quiet.
No cameras. No chaos.
Just the city breathing. I sat on the steps for a long time. Then I took out my phone, opened a new note, and titled it, Not the End. Because the truth is, stories don't end when we say they do. They end when we stop being afraid to tell them. And I had just begun.